you for the opportunity to speak this morning. Good morning, everybody. Just want to put some context around the title, and I did tweak it a little from what's printed, but we are a heritage hardware company, and I've spent the last 13 years in our space business, primarily on the heritage, I'll call it core business side of our business. In that business, we support the primary markets of civil, DoD, and traditional commercial. Traditional commercial I define as ISS resupply and the geocomp market largely. So over the past year, I've taken a detour and focused on trying to determine how Moog could play in new space and how we could support and build a business in this market. So that's what we're going to talk about today. New space, the way I define it, the context of new space in this discussion is, so we look at new space in two different arenas. One of them is increased use of LEO utilization focused on Earth-based type applications. The other side of new space that we talk about is the development of an in-space economy. Most of this talk is largely about the LEO-based side of that. So just a little bit about the history of Moog. So who is Moog and how did we get here? We were founded in 1951 by Bill Moog. He had an enabling technology called the hydraulic servo valve. And we grew from there 66 years ago to a 10,000 plus employee company and about $2.5 billion across the aerospace, defense, and industrial markets. Our focus, our core competency is largely in precision motion control systems and fluid control systems and some adjacencies around those. Just an overview of those industries and how they look from an overall revenue perspective. Aircraft is obviously the biggest piece. We're talking about a slice of the space and defense piece of this today. And this is our space and defense group. It's approximately $366 million, and half of that is the space side of the business. We're broken up into two business units, spacecraft controls business and a space access, aka launch vehicles and integrated systems business. We'll just talk about some of the core products we do in these businesses. We're focused on chemical and electrical propulsion on the spacecraft control side, attitude and orbit control, and we do have a lot of experience in the system design, integration, and test arena. From a product perspective, it's rocket engines, it's valves, regulators, and transducers, making their way up to integrated propulsion modules. We also do actuation, positioning mechanisms for the antennas and solar array drives, so this is an example of an integrated system there as well. And we do avionics, power, control, as well as some guidance, nav, and control. So what do we do on the space access and exploration side? Very similar. We expanded the motion control side with an acquisition of CSA Engineering about 10 years ago. On the vibration control side of things, propulsion and fluid control, and again, system design, integration, and test. Here's an example of some of that structures and payload accommodation, vibration control. This is a product called Soft Ride that dampens the load out for all the primary payloads on most of the major launch vehicles today. Avionics, again, both high power and low power, largely focused on the motion control systems that we do, as well as some guidance and nav and some command and data handling. And on the actuation system side, here's an example of an electrohydrostatic actuator. This example is actually was done on our development program with NASA years ago. It's a quad redundant, full two-fault tolerant electrohydrostatic actuator. So we do a lot of highly custom type solutions in support of these core markets. And again, valves and integrated propulsion systems. I'm going to play a quick video here to show how this all culminates in kind of our core business in support of the civil market. So we're seeing a sea change in the new space market. So the legacy business is what I refer to as the core, is a lot of what we share there, and we're really, really excited to be part of that, honored to be working with all the industry primes on SLS and Orion, as well as working with NASA on that program. But I want to talk about what we see changing in support of this new space market. So if we look at that legacy core market, our customer is interested in buying those components and maybe integrated subsystems, and they handle the integration of that solution. On the new space side, a lot of these customers, at least the LEO-based side, is very interested in the end use, the mission, the data. What are we going to do with the information that we're gathering from space? So from a hardware company, it's kind of hard to put your arms around it, but it's really not about the hardware. The hardware is a means to an end. On the legacy side, we do very custom, high-value, profitable components. These are developed to a pretty specific spec and statement of work, and they aren't necessarily the low-cost catalog component that maybe we'd be looking for on the new space side of the business. So the new space side is very focused on higher volume, lower cost, lower margin hardware, and the intention with the low Earth orbit is really get these launch rates up and help drive that cost and size down. On the legacy side of the business, very long-term missions, which you kind of got to get it right the first time, as we were talking about a little bit earlier. So it's not that there's not schedule pressure on these long-term missions, but much more focus on risk management and risk assurance. On the new space side, extreme schedule pressure. The investors want to be satisfied pretty quickly. On the legacy side, the funding sources are generally limited to NASA, the DoD, internal research and development. And on the new space side, there's billionaires and VCs helping support lots of new startup companies. So we kind of bridge this gap, and we're starting to look at this and say, gee, the values we have on the legacy side, what pieces of that, what strengths of that do we take over to this new space business? And where there are weaknesses on the legacy side, where don't we use those in the new space business? So what is this doing to the commercial landscape? Well, Pat, you mentioned yesterday morning Carisha Christensen from the Torrey Group, now the Bryce Technology Group. This is some data I borrowed from her report. So it represents commercial revenue in the space business, and unfortunately I didn't plot the entire line, but it's definitely continues to increase. But I took the hardware piece, the launch vehicle piece, the launch industry piece, and the satellite hardware piece, and then I took the remaining space revenue delta from that and plotted those. I did not collect the data between 2005 and 2013, but you can sort of see the trend. Both of them are trending up, the hardware side and the rest of the pie. Something interesting about 2013, you start to see a roll-off and a transition here in the business. So the hardware side looks like it's trending down. Now, 2 data points doesn't necessarily represent a trend, but it became interesting enough to us that we're starting to look at this. And in general, the pressures we're feeling as a hardware company, this is probably lagging data. But we coined this compression on the hardware side of the business, right? So what are we doing about it? We're looking at it along a continuum of 2 items, degree of complexity and degree of productization. On the complexity side, from components to complete system solutions, and on the productization side, from custom to catalog products. Maybe the other thing I didn't say at the start is we are not a prime, we are not a billionaire VC-backed company. We are also not a fully commoditized solution. So we lie somewhere in the middle, hence the middle class kind of mind the gap term. So here we are in the middle with an integrated subsystem, and one of the big challenges we have here is it's really tough to make a business case out of this, and it may come across as whining, but that's not the intent. The non-recurring for these highly custom integrated solutions really trumps the recurring to a point that that demonstrating a reasonable ROI becomes a challenge for a company like Moog. So in this new business, though, we are embracing this part. So we've coined it compression. We're doing things to both reduce the non-recurring and recurring, as well as work up and down this continuum. So we're focused on finding products and taking some of those compressed middle products down to a more productization model, as well as develop products in that low margin, higher volume, off-the-shelf solution range where we can close that business case. And on the other side of the coin, take some of what we're doing to enable that compression and go up market, up the value chain with a more integrated system solution. So refocus from the middle out. If anyone's watched Silicon Valley, there's a pun in there. But so Moog Shockwave is one example on the productized side of things. This is a low-cost vibration isolation solution for CubeSats. It really takes the loads down on the CubeSats and allows them to not worry so much about that solution and use this off-the-shelf answer to help them with their spacecraft and their payload. We've sold 120 of these units already to 15 customers, and the demand does seem to be growing, and the business case was made for us. And probably the first time we've ever actually, on the space side of our business, published some commercial pricing. So here's our commercial pricing for this product. It is semi-custom as well. It has some tunability. And then on the integration side, Gerstenmaier talked yesterday about orbital maneuvering vehicles. Well, Moog's off investing in the development of an orbital maneuvering vehicle right now, and it stemmed from our ESPA ring, our secondary payload adapter. It can also service as a spacecraft structure, and there's been some in-flight examples of that already. And we're taking it to the next step and thinking about how to use this as a spacecraft tug. So we've been heavily investing in this. And on the new space side of the business, this is really about, geez, we're thinking we have an answer that can get some of these LEO constellations operational and generating revenue faster and potentially for lower cost than any other solution right now. Also, you can imagine the other use cases in the core business, and as we go further into deep space, and what else an OMV like this, a space tug like this could enable in space. So that's a little bit about the what. Now I want to talk a little bit about the how. So we've set up a new operation. We developed a site within a site model, and over the past year have really built this out with it's still a relatively small dedicated team, but we removed them from the core business and basically building a clean sheet operation, new processes, new procedures, only adding what we need to, and using that team from beginning to end of life cycle, including business development all the way to low rate production. We're working with several customers on the new space side of things right now, developing products largely in the just do what we do today cheaper in order to build this out, and then we can start to look at the higher level of integration as well as productization in more detail, as well as get ready for the next phase of this, which is really scaling up for some higher rate production. So just to wrap things up, we've built this new operation for the complete life cycle. Clean sheet, we're only adding what we need to when we need to. We're balancing the strengths and weaknesses from our heritage business, and we're trying to execute a three-phase model. Early engagement with customers so that we can collaboratively identify solutions. This really focused, fast, and flexible development of these productized components and co-development of more integrated system solutions. On the productized component side, too, in the middle of that range, so like our TVC system example, this is where maybe we can't close the business case on our own, but one of the things we've been trying to communicate is spending some co-development of NRE to some new products as opposed to looking for the catalog solution with our higher-end custom catalog product or higher-end custom products is potentially a better answer in many cases. So the three takeaways here, enable compression through productization and integration. And if I had a fourth one, I think it would be around business model innovation. So I talked a lot about how we're doing this on the blue line of that curve and addressing, enabling the compression and getting some hardware content within this new space market. But when you look at the combined curve, obviously there's growth in the rest of that business, and we're looking at some innovative business model solutions there that I'm not necessarily prepared to talk about right now, but some innovation on the business side of this is pretty critical as well. And just to try and wrap things up, I was really struggling with how to close out this discussion. And I walked by a coworker's office as I was putting the charts together, and he had this chart hanging on the wall of remember how it all started. So Bill Moog founded the company in 1951, the Little Gem Valve Company. He stood up on a table and recruited his team back then and said, here's what we're going to go do. I need your help. I can't afford to pay you yet, but I need you to come do this with me. And he got a team to do that, and they've evolved to this hangar, and now we're worldwide $2.5 billion company, stemming from a first order $800 Bumblebee missile. So I kind of see this as a potential second renaissance for the company and maybe for the broader space industry, and really looking forward to the next phase of what we do here in space. So, and I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. We've got a couple of questions from the audience. So you showed this slight downtick in the amount of funds being spent on hardware. How would you explain that? Do you think the fact that especially some of the new space providers have decided to take their development in-house, has that played a role in it? What is your thought on that?
Yeah, I think there are a couple factors. I think one is definitely vertical integration. I think the other is reusability. So it's really driving the need for hardware down. So those are probably the two biggest elements. Maybe on the middle class kind of subcomponent, component piece of the puzzle, some of the things we're doing to minimize that cost and drive that curve down with compression is as an example in the actuators. We're not necessarily using custom ball screws. We're finding ways to make commercially available things work in those systems and solutions.
Is it a question bringing down the cost of your products, or is it also a question perhaps of innovating and providing leading edge technology, where some of the new space companies may not have the same R&D capabilities that you have? Yeah,
there's definitely some technology development to it. Additive manufacturing could play a role. We haven't fully embedded additive into some of our products yet. We've used it more for lead time benefits, but there is some innovation, and I think some of the use of more commercially available subcomponents is part of that innovation. So as you, switching gears a little bit, as you all switch gears into a more commercial space business friendly organization, what did that entail? What does that take from a structural standpoint, from a cultural standpoint? What does that mean? I'd say, so for the last year, I've been banging my head against the internal wall pretty good. So it looks on the surface when you start to go do this that you're competing with that core business. And the reality is we're trying to build a new business because we see a broad enough difference between what's happening in the core and what's happening in new space. So it has been an internal challenge. Really pulling a team away and building it that way has helped us. They don't get as buried in what we do to meet the sales for the next quarter and that sort of thing as well. So,
can you talk, for example, among your employee base, what percentage is based on traditional sales and business versus this new commercial business?
I'd say we're probably in the 95-5 right now. So,
okay.
Yeah, we're not very big yet. So
fair enough.
It is very much a startup environment within the company. So we're trying to basically start a new company.
How much do you think that the development of the ESPA ring and the adoption of that from the space sector and the launch sector has played in moving into this new commercial space business?
It has really helped. I think it's one of the avenues that gets us engaged with a lot of the new space business because there's customers that need to fly in that adapter. We also have lots of conversations with Spaceflight Services about brokering and how they're going to use those and sell the adapters to them as well. So,
Do you see a difference in how the international players react to some of these products versus domestic?
That's a good question. We really haven't engaged too heavily on the international side with what we're doing on the new space piece, so I don't know that I have a great answer for that one.
All right, well, maybe that's where you have the uptick in your curve again.
Right. I know there is a new space conference in Luxembourg in a couple of weeks, so maybe I'll go figure it out.
Get your passport ready. All right, Scott, thanks so much for your time.
Okay,
Cheers.
thank you.